if we are asking people to say something if they see something, it usually requires us to do something once that takes place and not just be words.
Mhm.
But what seems to have happened in the main mass shooting that we just witnessed this last week, it was exactly that. Many people had been warned. Many people have records, medical records of the mental problems that Robert Card had, the man that's alleged to have been the main mass shooter. Uh, this seems to be a problem, obviously, that goes even deeper than just Robert Card.
Mhm.
Obviously, we're going to start looking into the areas of what caused him to do this and why would someone do that. And that's all well and good, but in the end, there's no real sense to any of those answers because it's the workings of a madman. I think some of the question in this one needs to start going back to us in society, and I don't know the answer to any of this. Is are we the crazy ones for allowing these people to exist the way that they do when they had been institutionalized? Him for two
Right.
months this summer, which was not
Right.
that long ago. We're talking just a couple of
No.
months ago.
Right.
Having access to high-powered weapons, making terroristic threats to a Army Reserve base. Those to me seem like see something, say something, and they did. And somehow he's out there and able to fester and do what he's going to do. How much of a failure is this on society's part that we really need to start looking at rather than just being
Yeah.
victims of it?
It is a massive failure, and this is one of my passions, having worked in the past with psychotic people, dangerous people who were having hallucinations, delusions, paranoid thinking, and had committed horrible, violent crimes. And when not psychotic, they were very normal people, because that's psychosis is indicative of a brain disease. And that's different from a psychopathic murderer, right? A
Mhm.
psychotic person is driven by their brain that is malfunctioning. And so it's an illness, it's a biological illness. And people don't seem to have an understanding of that. And to spend 2 months in a psych hospital at this point, it's very rare
Mhm.
to find a bed in a hospital for more than 3 days at
Yeah.
this point. And so this shows this man was very, very ill. And so this is one that we could deconstruct and go back and who treated him, how was he treated, what was the discharge plan, what was the follow-up. We typically, if somebody gets in the hospital, which is rare, so many dangerous people are out there having these paranoid delusions and hallucinations, walking on the streets, living in homeless camps. We don't do anything until something really scary happens typically. And then there's no aftercare that they're forced to participate in.
Mhm.
And that's the thing, because people that are mentally ill in this way with a brain disease, they don't realize that they're sick.
Mhm.
And so they don't stay on medication, they don't stay in treatment unless they're mandated, unless they're assigned a case manager who follows up, who visits the home. And we need red flag laws, which, some states have passed. Maine was not one of them, so that if relatives or neighbors or somebody has a concern about someone's mental status, the police can go out, do a welfare check, and then confiscate the weapons if these concerns prove legitimate. So we have a massive social failure. There are states that are now trying to create laws that mandate people with dangerous psychotic tendencies into treatment, and that they would be assigned case management. They would be basically forced, I know this is controversial, but to take medication to calm down those psychotic symptoms so they don't harm themselves or other people. But this is, it's just a nightmare. And I see case after case after case locally and nationally when I follow the news of people who have murdered their children. People have done these horrendous things. And many, many times it's because they're psychotic.
Mhm.
And if we did a better job of identifying psychosis, treating psychosis, following up on people after treatment, we would save so many lives. And 10 to 20% of these mass shootings are caused directly by someone's psychotic delusions. Now, the other percentage are psychopathic and they're not psychotic, and that's a different thing altogether. But still, we're talking about saving thousands of people, all kinds of people, if we did a better job of dealing with psychosis. But the general public doesn't understand
Mhm.
that hearing voices, having paranoid delusions, that this is a biological disease of the brain and it can be treated.
Mhm.
But we have to do a better job at coming together as a society and creating an avenue that pushes these folks into treatment, because very often they're released after a hospitalization into custody of their family. The families don't know how to manage it.
Yeah.
They don't understand it. And they may be saying, oh, well, we told him that the voices were just his imagination or the voices were in his head. That's not effective.
Mhm.
It doesn't work that way. And so, again, I wish we could do a better job of educating our legislators, because I think we often have people in government that create the laws and vote to pass the laws, but they don't understand the nature of severe chronic mental illness like this. And it's catastrophic. And then when we have ready access to weapons of war, as this man was a firearms instructor,
Sure.
I mean, it's miraculous that more people weren't killed. And, we just cross our fingers that he's captured before more people are killed. It's just a nightmare.
Without a doubt. Were we doing a better job in our country of uh, keeping this under control 30, 40 years ago prior to the state hospitals, many of them being
Yes.
shut down
Yes.
in the Reagan
Yes.
administration?
Yeah.
Because that to me, I mean, there was good ones and there was bad ones, and
Yeah.
people can make arguments both ways. Of some
Yeah.
were horrifically inhumane, which they were, and there's documents of
Yeah.
that, and there's plenty that were very lovely places and did a great
Yeah.
job. It seems the argument's always, oh, those are horrible, horrible places. And when you see what's left of them, Waverly Hills, that's the one that comes to mind. But there's
Mhm.
tons of them out there that still exist
Mhm.
that are just standing, and they're old relics of a time gone by. Why is it so difficult, or why would we not want to bring those sort of facilities back into play in a modern way? I can imagine we would be
Exactly.
able to regulate them a hell of a lot better
Yeah.
than we used to. So we don't
Yes.
have those gothic, scary, bad facilities where people are being treated in very inhumane ways,
Right.
but do it right. Do it right this
Right.
time. Why? Why don't we do it? We have an example of one time in history when we did, which is not
Mhm.
all that long ago, and
Mhm.
that really did keep a lot of them, off the streets, off of being
Mhm.
alone by themselves. I can guarantee in almost any community you go into, if there is a closed down former state hospital, and many areas have them, and if you trace it back a little bit, the area surrounding that hospital does have a lot of individuals living by themselves with mental
Yeah.
illness. They're coming and going. I lived near one in Wausau, Wisconsin years ago, and I asked, like, "What's going on over here? Why is this area like this?" Oh, the state hospital was over there, and then when they shut
Right.
down, if nobody was there, no family to take these people, which many times families just shunned them because they didn't want to deal with it, then they're off on their own. Why can't we go back to something where we can humanely treat these people and help them? Because some of these problems, yeah, they're beyond their control, and it's not even their fault
Yeah.
that they have them.
No, it's not their fault. It's not a disease that anybody would wish
Yeah.
upon themselves or anyone else. It's a horrible, horrible illness. And you're right. You're completely right. And I have been, talking about this for decades. It's compassionate. It's what we need to do. I had an aunt with schizophrenia, and she had 13 children, and it was just a nightmare. And bounced around from relative to relative to relative. No one could understand how to help her, and nobody got her on medication. And so it's very close to my heart. And we need to come together. And I think exactly what you're saying, this is the message we need to get out there, that it is not compassionate to throw these people out into the cold, eating out of garbage cans when they can do that. And then when they get some money, going in and buying a semi-automatic weapon,
Mhm.
you know, to take out the delusions that they're having,
Yeah.
which means people at a bowling alley or a restaurant or a bar. We're not, this is not humane. It's not
No.
humane. And there are people that very much come from the position of, oh, but it's, freedom and personal rights, and people have the right to eat out of garbage cans if they want to. They don't understand that these folks, these poor folks, are not making rational choices. It's
Yeah.
just, it's sad.
Who would ever say it's a right to eat out of a gar? Sure, you have a right. I have a right. You have a right. There, we can go to the dumpster behind the Cracker Barrel right now and have a delicious meal. I'm sure, or not.
I
But
have been told
yes.
that exact line. Yeah.
Wow. But it's one of those things where nobody wants to do something like that. Nobody
Mhm.
wants to be in that sort of position. We seem to really put a gray area on the word rights.
Mhm.
There's rights, and there's being humane to people.
Exactly.
And just to say you have the right to do something doesn't mean that they can do something. And
Exactly.
that's the
Exactly.
problem. They can't. They're not capable of acting in these rational ways that the rest of us can think, well, just go do that, go do this. They can't. It's not even an
Exactly.
option. Uh,
No.
why did we shut those down all those years ago?
I think from exactly what you identified, that there were abuses in the system.
Hmm.
They were not well regulated. There was a lot of, undercover exposés done about
Hmm.
the snake pit kind of environments. And this plan, the original plan, was that they would close down these large institutions and people would then be channeled into local, smaller, county funded community mental health programs where they would have residential treatment in small, family kind of environments with trained staff that were there. Way back in the 80s, I worked in programs like that. There are a few of them. The problem is, this was a plan that there was no money for,
Hmm.
and it was never funded. And the counties are simply unable, it's expensive to run programs like this. And so, even though we do have a system of county mental health departments, they're swamped, they're overwhelmed, they're understaffed, and there's no way they can create housing and the kind of resources that would take care of the millions of people who need it. So I think the government is really good about passing laws that mandate things, but there's no funding to make it happen. And
Yeah.
so it just doesn't happen. So there was a plan, wasn't a bad plan, except nobody sat down and said, who's going to pay for this and how is this practically
Mhm.
going to work?
Yeah, it just makes absolutely no sense at all. I mean, if you were to try and suggest a solution to it, would it be down the road of what I was just talking about, having the state hospitals come back in a modern way? But you
Yes.
obviously have more insight on this than I do. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think if we could beef up the county services for people who are not dangerous and can be supervised out in the community, I think adding more group homes, I think, called residential treatment community homes, I think that would be fine for some people, but they all need a case manager. They need to be treated with the right medication that's going to diminish their symptoms and keep them from becoming dangerous. But there are folks who are just really severely ill, and they may not be able to be managed and taken care of in that kind of setting. And there's no reason we can't have compassionate state hospitals. There's no reason we can't. We know how to do that.
Hey, it's Tony Brueski. If you want more of our interview with our guests, be sure to check out our podcast, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Just search that wherever you download podcasts and press subscribe. Also, you can check out our YouTube channel for the full video version of the interviews as well, under the same name, Hidden Killers with Tony Brueski. Check it out, subscribe, binge, and enjoy. Thanks for watching.